Land, the original currency, every empire was built on it, every war was fought for it. And every civilization that lost it disappeared. Before gold, before paper, before Bitcoin. There was land, the oldest form of wealth, the first currency, and the most enduring symbol of power. Welcome to It's Financial History too, where money, power, and history collide. And where every new technology only reveals an older truth. We talk about digital scarcity like it as a modern miracle, as if Bitcoin invented the idea of turning code into value. But long before algorithms and blockchains, humanity had already discovered the original immutable ledger, written not in data, but in soil. Land was the first hard asset, finite, visible, and unforgivable. It couldn't be printed, mined, or replicated. And because of that, every monetary system that followed gold, credit, fiat, crypto, was just another attempt to recreate what land already was, a store of value backed by reality. You see, money wasn't born to create wealth. It was born because most people couldn't own land. Money was a receipt for access, a portable promise that you could rent a piece of permanence without touching the earth itself. But the truth never changed. Land didn't serve money. Money served land. The birth of ownership. In ancient Egypt, wealth wasn't measured in coins. It was measured in acres along the Nile. Floodplains were value. Harvests were liquidity. Pharaohs didn't hoard metal, they hoarded territory. Whoever controlled the soil controlled survival. Centuries later, Rome turned that same logic into an empire. The Senate divided conquered territories into latifundia, vast estates worked by slaves. Land wasn't just income. It was identity, citizenship, collateral, and power rolled into one. The poor didn't just lack money. They lacked a claim on existence itself. When Rome fell, it didn't leave behind a currency. It left behind a blueprint. Feudalism. Europe's dark ages weren't defined by ignorance. They were defined by ownership. The king owned the crown. The church owned the land. Everyone else owned nothing. That's the part people miss when they romanticize sound money. There was nothing sound about a world where you could toil for 40 years on a field and still die owing rent to a man who never touched it. Land was wealth, but only for the few allowed to claim it. And that exclusivity was its genius. The first blockchain, the blockchain of the Middle Ages, wasn't digital. It was written in law, lineage, and bloodlines. It was transparent to those who mattered and immutable to those who didn't. That system didn't end because it failed. It ended because it became too obvious. Peasants revolted. Merchants rose. And by the time capitalism arrived, land hadn't vanished. It had evolved. The Industrial Revolution was powered not by ideas, but by land mortgages. Banks didn't lend against dreams. They lent against acres. Factories stood on collateral. Railways stretched across purchased rights of way. Even the first government bonds, Britain's consols, were backed by land rents. When capitalism claimed to replace feudalism, it was lying. It simply monetized it. Land became financialized, cut into parcels, titled, taxed, and securitized. Ownership turned from privilege to product. The feudal lord became the landlord. The serf became the tenant. Different names, same dependency. The illusion of progress. Every time humanity invents a new form of wealth, we rebuild the same hierarchy. Gold was condensed land mined scarcity. Fiat was land abstracted rent promises printed on paper. And now Bitcoin, for all its revolutionary promise, is digital land finite, mined, owned, and defended by code instead of armies. Scarcity didn't die. We just learn how to simulate it. Listen to how people describe Bitcoin: digital real estate, unforgivable property, self-sovereignty. It's all the same language, echoes of feudal DNA. Because deep down, humans still crave one thing: ownership that outlives them. Bitcoiners call it decentralization. The nobles called it legacy. Different tools, same instinct. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Even in a digital age, power still belongs to whoever controls the ground beneath your feet. The center of gravity: crypto wealth, stock wealth, paper wealth. They all flow back to land. When prices rise, the winners park their profits in property. When inflation bites, land holds its value best. And when the markets crash, central banks don't buy coins. They buy mortgages, claims on land. You can't eat Bitcoin. You can't live in a stock certificate. But you can sleep on land, plant on land, defend land. That's why every revolution that tries to escape it eventually circles back to it, because land isn't an asset. It's the stage on which every other asset performs. Zoom out and the cycle is always the same. First comes land, then credit, then collapse. And when the paper burns, humanity runs back to the only thing left that can't be printed: dirt. It happened after the South Sea Bubble, after 1929, after 2008. Every digital boom ends in a physical rush back to real property. That's not superstition, that's gravity. The real reserve currency, while currencies inflate and empires crumble, land just sits there, quietly compounding. It's the only investment that doesn't move, yet everything else moves around it. Every generation claims to have invented a better version of land: gold, bonds, crypto. But none replace it. They only orbit it. Even central banks, the high priests of abstraction, still hoard land through government properties and real estate portfolios. They don't brag about it, but they understand. In the end, all value must settle somewhere real. That's the cruel genius of land. It doesn't need to change to stay relevant. Everything else does. Today, the world's real estate is worth over $380 trillion, more than the global stock and bond markets combined. Every innovation, every financial product, every line of digital code still sits under a ceiling made of land. Land is the real reserve currency, the collateral behind civilization. It doesn't just generate wealth. It defines it. It's the foundation of credit, the backbone of taxation, and the invisible infrastructure of the monetary system. Governments borrow against it. Banks lend into it. And when nations collapse, it's the land, not the paper, that survives. The hidden feudalism. The modern world likes to pretend ownership is fluid, that we've been moved beyond kings and castles. But every system still answers to the same map, only with new borders. The top 10% of humanity now owns over 85% of global land value. That isn't an accident. It's feudalism, rebranded as the housing market. Real estate doesn't just shelter people, it shelters capital. The wealthy don't buy homes to live in them. They buy them to store money. Money that needs a physical anchor in a digital storm. In cities like London, New York, and Vancouver, entire neighborhoods have turned into vaults, dark windows, empty towers, titles held by shell companies and offshore trusts. It's not housing, it's collateral with a skyline. And without it, modern finance would collapse. Mortgages are the gears that turn potential into liquidity. Once you sign a deed, your home becomes a data point in the machinery of global credit. That's why interest rates rule modern life. They don't just dictate money, they dictate access to land. Raise rates and the gates close. Lower them and the bidding wars begin. We call it monetary policy, but it's really land rationing. The principle hasn't changed since medieval times. The few own, the many rent. The manor house became a mortgage. The hierarchy stayed. The engineered scarcity. But here's the twist. For the first time in history, the scarcity of land is engineered. Governments restrict supply through zoning. Developers inflate prices through speculation. Central banks keep credit cheap enough to keep the illusion alive. Every player protects the myth of scarcity because the whole system depends on it. If land became truly affordable, the hierarchy would collapse. Because land isn't just where value lives, it's where power hides. The global land grab. Nowhere is this clearer than in the developing world, where land rights remain fragile. Across Africa, Latin America, and Asia, corporations and elites quietly buy millions of acres, larger than some nations, for farming, lithium, or future carbon credits. These aren't real estate deals. They're pre-claims on the 21st century. Digital wealth may create the illusion of liquidity, but land is the right to extract reality itself. The mirror of Bitcoin, and that's what makes Bitcoin's story so ironic. It was meant to break the monopoly, to create a kind of ownership no government could touch. For a while, it looked like it might succeed. A decentralized ledger, a finite supply, a network beyond politics. But over time, it began to resemble the very system it rebelled against. The early adopters became the landlords of cyberspace, mining first, owning most, and renting out their holdings through exchanges and lending platforms. Scarcity concentrated again, at the top. And when the profits came, they flowed right back into real land. Crypto gains turned into condos. Tokens into titles. Even the language betrayed the truth. Bitcoin mining. Real estate in the metaverse. It As the same metaphor recycled, the dream of digital land for a generation priced out of the real thing. But the irony cuts deeper. Even Bitcoin depends on geography, on electricity, hardware, and servers rooted somewhere on Earth. Its independence is an illusion. It's land again, wearing a digital mask. The eternal game. So what does this mean for the future of wealth? It means the game never really moved online. It just expanded the board. The rules haven't changed. He who controls scarcity controls value. He who controls value controls time. And he who controls time owns everyone else's labor. From the pharaohs to the metaverse, power has always been territorial, not metaphorical. Even the richest companies on Earth, Apple, Amazon, Google, measure their dominance not only in code, but in land footprint, campuses, data centers, warehouses, because they understand what we've forgotten. No matter how digital life becomes, control still requires dirt. The last asset, the Romans had their empire. The British had their colonies. Today it's real estate investment trusts and sovereign wealth funds, buying the planet parcel by parcel. And the ordinary person? More landless than ever before. Home ownership has become the modern citizenship test, the line between belonging and exclusion. Renting isn't failure. It's taxation without legacy. That's the part no one tells you when they talk about Bitcoin or financial freedom. The rich don't hoard cash. They hoard permanence. And permanence only exists in one place, the ground beneath your feet. Because in the end, every coin, bond, or token is just a promise that you'll be allowed to stay on the land. That's the original contract. Everything else is commentary. You can invent new technologies, new currencies, new utopias. But until you solve the problem of ownership, you're just running simulations, and history doesn't reward simulations. It rewards whoever holds the deed. So the next time someone tells you Bitcoin is digital gold, remind them, gold was only valuable because it came from land. And when the Wi-Fi drops, when the markets crash, when the servers go dark, it won't be the blockchain that feeds you. It'll be the soil that someone else owns. Land was the first asset. It will be the last. Because no matter how virtual our world becomes, they're not making any more of it. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History doesn't just repeat, it compounds. And here, we follow the money all the way back to where it began.